right. So thank you so much for joining us for this installment of Diversity Dialogues, which is a virtual conversation series that we began last year to talk about honoring our past, celebrating our present, and ensuring an equitable and inclusive future. I'm Carlos Smith, the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion here at VCU School of Dentistry, and it is February 2022. It's Black History Month. So I'm very excited to be in dialogue tonight with Dr. Erma Freeman. She is a Chase City, Virginia native and had a private dental practice of her own for more than 20 years. She was a member of the Virginia Board of Dentistry in the 1990s and also worked for 13 years as a dentist with the State Department of Corrections before retiring. She's an avid volunteer, still just a stalwart advocate for access to oral health care throughout the state of Virginia. She is a graduate, which we'll get to later in the conversation, of some of Virginia's most storied and legendary historically Black colleges or universities. And so I'm just excited to be with her. This year actually marks the 45th anniversary of her being a member of the graduating class of 1977 here at MCV, which it was known at the time. She also has been awarded the School of Dentistry's Trailblazer Award, which she received in 2019. And so I'm just honored to talk with you tonight. I was at that ceremony when you got that Trailblazer Award, and you offered such rich words of wisdom that I thought we got to get her back and talk to a little bit larger audience and really encourage those of us who are still walking these halls that you did in such a legendary way back finishing in 1977. So thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Freeman.
Once again, Dr. Smith, thank you for the invitation. And as I said earlier, I consider it an extreme honor to have been invited.
Yes, the honor is certainly ours. I'll get started we have a few questions planned for Dr. Freeman tonight, and if she veers in a different direction, that's more than fine too, if you have some things you want to share with us. But as someone who teaches ethics, which I think most people know, one of the things that I have found in the last few years is really the power of what we call narrative ethics and hearing someone's story and understanding a story. Particularly as the first African-American female graduate of the School of Dentistry here, I'd love for you to just begin tonight by simply sharing a little bit of your story with us, where you grew up, what influence did your family have on you, and the different choices you've made in your life.
Well, I grew up where I returned in Southside Virginia, Mecklenburg County. However, I'm currently in South Hill, Virginia, and my home place is a very much more rural spot. Concord community of Chase City, Virginia is where I grew up. And I was educated for the first 6 years of my life in a 2-room wooden frame school with 2 rooms, 2 teachers, 3 classes to a room, and never left my community until 7th grade. And that's when I got to ride the bus to town.
Oh,
so
wow.
That was a major experience. Having been a student, that's what I enjoyed, studying. There was always the expectation from teachers and others in the community that I would go to college. But I had an older brother who was the first person in my immediate family to attend college, and he graduated from Virginia State College, now university, and did 4 years of ROTC and was a commissioned officer upon graduation. He was my hero, our role model, our rock star, everything, and so I wanted to be like him. And as a result, I did attend college. at St. Paul's College in Lawrenceville. And St. Paul's was closest to home, but the choice was made to go to St. Paul's because they offered me a couple of dollars more scholarship money than Virginia State did or that Howard did. So I was able to stay closer to home and went to absolutely a fantastic environment for someone as young and naive as I, who had never left home except to spend the night with one of my best friends, with her family overnight, but I had never been away from home. St. Paul's was perfect. The faculty and staff were nurturing, and that's exactly what I needed to make the transition from mom to college, to being in another town. And the experience of St. Paul's will always be with me because I had, as I said, the nurturing that I needed, and I developed wonderful friends, lifelong friends. And I'm just sorry that it had to close, but it helped prepare me for the transition to higher education, where I immediately went to Virginia State University it was then college, for a master's program. And that's it in a nutshell. From West End High School in Clarksville to St. Paul's College to Virginia State College. And then I was a graduate and had no clue as to what I would do. I had a master's in biology and unfortunately hadn't really considered what I would do. I just thought I would keep going to school. So ended up with a wonderful experience in Lynchburg, Virginia, a place where I grew to love, and I became a certified teacher, which I did not have certification because I was not in education. Mm-hmm. It only took a couple of courses to do that, and I enjoyed that experience. I never thought that I would. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that arc of your journey with us. And you mentioned, of course, St. Paul's. You mentioned Virginia State. I'm a Hampton grad, and so when we talk about health professionals, particularly health professionals of color, African American, dentists, pharmacists, physicians, we continue to be represented in lower than ideal numbers, right, across the different health professions. With your, HBCU ties and status as an alumni, what role do you think HBCUs play in continuing to lay a foundation for more minorities to enter the health professions?
Well, one of the things that I think should be done, and I can't put the responsibility all the way on HBCUs, but because they prepare educators for early childhood education, I think the focus should be placed on early education. Children in elementary school should be start the grooming process way back then. It's too late once someone is in high school. Not too late, but they would be better prepared. And I think the HBCUs could do a wonderful, give them a wonderful gift of preparing them for professional schools, health professions as well as other professions, but get started sooner than high school and college. Help them be better prepared with understanding of finance, business and finance, which is something we tend to stay away from in HBCUs. We need other than those who major in business, the rest of us, and I'm speaking now personally from when I was there, I venture to say some people probably didn't even know how to balance a checkbook. We need to do more in the line of preparing students for an understanding of business, finance, and the need for health professions. Possibly the reasons that we don't have more in that in this field is because we are not comfortable with what it entails.
Yeah, no, I think that's really rich. And I think it actually aligns with some of the latest research that shows that most of our students, irrespective of race or ethnicity, when they're admitted to dental school, they're saying that they made that decision to pursue dentistry as early as middle school now. So you're spot on in that we have to have an earlier access point. And, you know, to certain of our communities that maybe are more impoverished or, you know, lack role models sometimes, you know, the goal to be a dentist is almost as pie in the sky as being a professional athlete, right? It doesn't seem realistic or attainable. So I think you're so spot on in terms of talking about interest in the career at that earlier, younger stage where they're still excited about learning. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
for me, it was just accidental.
Yeah, so tell us about that. What was your first exposure to the dentist or dentistry as a career? How did you end up sort of accidentally pursuing this path?
Well, let me first explain to you about my first experience with dentistry. And I'm not embarrassed to say this because that was the culture, that was the way things were when I was growing up. There was no money for dentistry, just for routine preventive dentistry. In fact, it was not even in our vocabulary. Dentist was in our vocabulary as a relief of a toothache.
Sure.
When you had one. And I was fortunate that I was 20 years old before I ever had a toothache. So I had never been to a dentist until I was almost getting out of St. Paul's. I was halfway through college. And when I had my first discomfort from a toothache, there was root canal, not even in anybody's vocabulary, not just mine, but
sure.
You know, it was not heard of. The families, I was poor. I didn't know that I was poor because everybody in my community, we were on the same level. It was only when I went to town that I found out that I was poor. We had our parents would do whatever they had to do to relieve pain if we had a toothache, which the treatment for which was to remove the tooth. And so my first experience was with that, as I said, was at St. Paul's. And the person that I met to give me relief from my toothache was none other than Dr. Ford T. Johnson, whose name is, he's just a giant in the Richmond area politically as well as practitioner. Dr. Ford T. Johnson had attended St. Paul's College, and he had a satellite office outside the gate at St. Paul's where the students would go if they needed dental care. I think he was there maybe possibly 2 days a week. And so it turned out that years and years later, Dr. Johnson became my employer after dental school.
Oh, wow.
And mentor. I had an associateship in his practice for about a year. And just a wonderful, wonderful person to know as I was learning my way through in the profession and ultimately private practice. But that was my first experience with dentistry. The way that I got to MCV is that my graduate school professor, who was kind of like a parent as well, had called me one day because he's the reason I was in Lynchburg, having taught there in high school in the high school system in Lynchburg before he started teaching at Virginia State. He called one day and said that a former student who was currently in dental school at MCV said that they were looking for minority students. They were trying to reach certain numbers that they needed to reach at the time. And he suggested that I pursue it. I investigated and gave it some thought. And even though I loved teaching, I also was excited about the opportunity to go back to school. So I submitted my academic records, my transcripts. I met the director of admissions, and shortly after that was accepted. And I wrote a letter of resignation to Lynchburg Public Schools and started the scariest chapter of my life, attending MCV Dental School. One of a total of 8 Blacks and a total of 9 females in 1973. So that's how I got there.
You know, that arc and the narrative you told us, I could probably stop there and ask so many more follow-up questions. I do want to point out something that is a marvel to me about Dr. Johnson. You mentioned that he had a satellite office outside of campus. And I think sometimes in delivery of oral health care, we think of this concept of multiple offices as very newfound, you know, and very modern in some sense. And so to hear that, you know, in the 60s, like there was that level of ingenuity, particularly coming from an African-American doctor, is really fascinating to me, that he had, you know, the foresight to say, okay, these students and the faculty here and the folks here who can access my care, maybe not in Richmond, but need it down here near St. Paul's, I'm going to set up this second office where I'm going to be 2 days a week. I just think that's fascinating.
Well, if you had been around and had known Ford T, as I call him fondly, as many of our colleagues in the Richmond area know very well, he did not fit the usual mold for what one would consider. He was unique, and we don't have enough time to talk about him, but he was a trailblazer in his own right.
No, that's wonderful. And then, because what did you teach? What subject did you teach? You taught science?
I had a master's degree in biology. So that was all that I knew, just the life sciences. And it was interesting that when I got my teaching assignment, it was to teach earth science. I nearly had a stroke. And fortunately, they were very, very wonderful about changing my assignment to something that I was more comfortable with. And I did teach physical science for 1 year. I had to study every night, but after my first year, then I was given life sciences, which was my comfort zone. And it was wonderful. Back then, middle school was junior high. And there were 7th, 8th, and 9th graders in junior high. That's not the way it is anymore, but I taught ultimately seventh graders life science after my first year.
Wonderful. You started talking about, once you resigned from Lynchburg Public Schools and you started what was then the scariest, sort of chapter of your life. Let's talk about that a little bit. What was your dental school experience like here at VCU? Do you feel that there were expectations that you wouldn't succeed, that you wouldn't make it? What was that journey like?
Well, the first 3 weeks, I was a part of a summer session, I guess that was created for students who were, quote, at risk. I was among them, along with some other minority students and students from other areas. I don't know how the selections were made, but I believe all of the minority students who were in the class of 77 who enrolled in 73, that we were in that session. And so I had never, my only interracial experience had been the teaching experience. When I went to Lynchburg, I was assigned to a predominantly white middle school. And it was a wonderful experience, but I had never studied in an interracial setting. And so all of that was brand new to me. I didn't have time to focus on it because after the first day or two, I had roller skates on, just trying to meet all of the demands, and I didn't know what color I was. And my focus was on trying to get the work done. But back to the summer session, at the end of it, one of the instructors who had come from the West Campus, which we called it back then, the West Campus was the academic campus and the East Campus was the medical division. So one of the instructors from the West Campus said to me as he was on his way out, he said, "You're not going to make it because you can't read." Well, that was crushing because I'd been through elementary and high school and undergraduate and graduate school, and no one had ever told me I couldn't read. And so that was what he said. That was his remark, and then he left. And so the only thing that I could say to myself was, well, he doesn't know me. How can he say that,
Sure.
that I won't make it? Well, what that comment did was to reinforce my determination not to fail. It just was not an option. I don't know his name, but I wish that I did so that I could have shown him my degree, but he wasn't relevant after that. He was significant because he probably helped me to get out, to get through. And there were other instances. At graduation, one of the nicest faculty members came up to me and he said, "Of all the people in your class, you're the one I least expected to make it." And I was shocked, but those are realities, and I was just kind of not really looking at things through the right lens, I guess. But and he was not being ugly. He was just really happy for me, but that was his compliment.
You offer so much. The comment from the first faculty, and you said that his statement was significant because it was a motivating force for you, or reigniting that motivation. But you said then he wasn't relevant, and I think that's such a beautiful, probably encouragement to us all, even still today, that we can encounter challenges and stumbling blocks, but we can't stop there. We have to push past it, and then that stumbling block really sometimes doesn't even become relevant to the final, arc of our journey and your story. And we're talking about you and highlighting you, and we don't even know that person's name. So, I just think that's the beauty of sometimes things that are a challenge, but things that you've had the ability to overcome.
Right.
Yeah.
I could not allow him, I just couldn't give him that much power to interfere with my goal was to graduate.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think sometimes people don't even realize that the intention is not harmful, the commentary is not helpful.
Right.
To say, here you are on graduation day and someone's saying, oh, you're the one I least expected it to make it. And it's like, well, it's graduation, so I definitely made it. So success has definitely been the proof in the pudding, as it were, as it relates to your life. So that's been fantastic. So tell us what you did after graduation. What did life look like? Did you get a job right away? Did you work for Dr. Johnson right away?
Well,
what did things look like?
I worked with Dr. Johnson in his dental practice as an associate for almost a year. And then it looked like I needed to explore some other experiences. And at that time, I got a job working for the Department of Corrections Youth Division. They advertised for a full-time dentist, and the salary was, I don't have any idea what it was. I don't remember what it was then, but it was better than, what I was making. So I applied and got the position. There was another dentist when I got there who happened to have been a former instructor at MCV.
Wow.
Very interesting, because I think he thought that he was my supervisor. And he was not. But that was not the really interesting part. Was that when I got my first paycheck, it was dreadfully below what I was supposed to be making. And I went to the superintendent at the facility, and she was just, she couldn't believe it. And so we started trying to resolve this issue of, why I was being paid so much less than what the position of a first-time dentist was supposed to make. And went to human resources, and they said I was earning what I was supposed to earn as a first-year dentist. Well, we had to eventually go to then Senator Douglas Wilder, who was a member of the Virginia State Legislature, who helped somehow find out through that human resources had not changed the policy manual. Once upon a time, senior dental students did work for the Department of Corrections as dentist trainees under the supervision of a licensed dentist. So I guess because there was a former faculty member at the facility who was there, hired maybe 2 weeks before I was, maybe they looked at him as my supervisor. I don't know, but I had a license just like he did. Took a few months, probably 6 or 7 months, to get the issue resolved.
Wow.
Where human resources understood that I was not a dentist trainee, I was a licensed dentist, and it was simply a first year practicing dentistry. By the time they authorized all of my back pay, I took the check and resigned, decided that, maybe in order for me to be happy, I had to be in my own business, which is what I went about doing. I made a few phone calls, and I realized that the village of Ettrick, which is where Virginia State is in southern Chesterfield County, had no dentist. The nearest dentist was across the Appomattox in the city of Petersburg. And I decided that I wanted a practice in Ettrick, which is where I opened my practice and stayed for 20 years.
You know, it is so beautiful. I'm almost a little emotional listening to your story, your journey. You know, you're the first Black woman to make it successfully through dental school. You get a job and you still have to fight. Yeah, I mean, you still have to fight just to be recognized as an actual dentist. And I mean, it's not, and maybe I'm a little too militant. There's no way that was a mistake, that there is a thought that you were a trainee and not a fully licensed dentist, to the point of then you have to go the route of enlisting assistance from a legislator. You know, I mean, it's just mind-boggling how the fight never ceases. And it's just a new fight. It's a new stumbling block or hurdle put in front of you, even though you've met these bars each and every time. And you want to be treated, you know, with the respect that comes along with the degree that you've earned. And so I hate to hear that experience, but it's motivating and it's encouraging, I think, hopefully to our listeners as well, that you have to keep going.
Well, that was just one example. I mean, there are others. Someone that I had met when I was in graduate school at Virginia State was a recruiter for the Army Reserves. And he kept harassing and harassing and harassing me until I finally decided, okay, what harm is there in applying? And so I applied for position as in the Army Reserves. And when I got the call to meet the colonel who was in charge of the reserve unit in that area of Richmond, we talked, and he looked at me at the end of the conversation and he said, "I don't know what to do with you." He said, "I've never had a female with as many degrees as you have." And I thought he was kidding. I kept waiting to hear from him and I never did. I guess he just put my application in the basket and covered it up with another one, but he never did call. And that was what he said to me. "I don't know what to do with you." So he did nothing. I couldn't get a bank loan with 3 degrees without a cosigner.
Wait, pause. Let's talk about that. So you're ready to open up your practice. And that was when I was working with Dr. Johnson, that I needed $1,500 for something. I don't know what it was, but what was important, that my 3 degrees didn't matter to the bank. I had to have a man co-sign for that $1,500. And fortunately, one of my younger brothers was in Richmond and he co-signed for me. I bought my dental practice, the building that my practice was in, with a credit card. Wow.
And these are just things that probably most of you take for granted, that you can go to the bank and get a loan. It was not so back in the 70s.
And I think what's important with that, Dr. Freeman, that was not that long ago. I mean, no. It was, but it wasn't, right? And so I think that, you know, as someone who teaches ethics, as someone who does diversity, equity, and inclusion work, you know, when we have these conversations today, we still have patients who have these types of life experiences. You know, it's not purely historical for them. It's your lived experience. And so it's just, these stories are so crucial. And I think also help those of us who come behind and are standing on, on your shoulders in a way. It grounds us, it gives us humility, it gives us even additional sense of purpose to say, here you are, a professional person that they won't even classify in the correct job. I mean, that one just still is still sitting with me. They won't classify you in the right job category. And if you had not pushed, how long would it have taken for them to correct it? Would they ever have corrected?
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that is fascinating. And particularly, we use fancy words now like intersectionality to describe your seat as both a woman and as someone who's African American. And sort of this double whammy, if you will, that you're unfortunately at the bottom of all the list, right? Because you're a woman and you're Black in the way that society has viewed that. And so again, your ability to get a loan, your ability to start a practice, all of these things is just a fascinating truth that to see you today is even more encouraging, that these little problems we have now, they pale in comparison to the obstacles you encountered and overcome. We've got a little bit more time, if that's okay. So you practiced for nearly 20 years, and then you went back to corrections dentistry. Is that correct? After that,
I did. There's a big part of that 20 years that we haven't discussed, and during that time, I married and became a mother, and I had a robust, active, bright, bouncing baby boy who I didn't know until he was about 4, had some special needs. Because he was very intellectually bright and very active and moving and jumping and hopping off everything. And everybody told me, leave him alone, he's all boy. That's how we were told to handle children back then. So when he was in 3rd grade, it's when the problems really started. I started getting the calls almost every day. I'd have to go to school and intervene or advocate on his behalf. And one of the assistant principal suggested that maybe he needed to be in special education, which crushed me because, special education meant somebody was not intellectually capable of performing, and it doesn't mean that at all. I know that now, and we don't have time to talk. That's a totally different subject.
Sure.
But because his needs became so great as he reached puberty, the problems in school became greater. And it reached a point where, and I forgot to mention that I was appointed to the Board of Dentistry in 1993 by Governor Wilder, which took me away from practice. From my practice, it was very demanding, and they should give continuing education credits for anyone who sits on the Board of Dentistry, because if I had to study all the time. So it reached a point where after my 3rd year, I realized that I was away from home. I was away from my practice. There was quite a bit of traveling, which was great, but not when you have the responsibilities that I had with a child. And so I had to consider what our future was going to be, because at that time I was a single parent. My marriage didn't last. Motherhood did. And I had to do what was best for my son. And so he was in a residential school, fortunately, for a period of time, which allowed me the time to get my practice in a marketable state.
Mhm.
And I approached a company that sold dental practices. And they told me what to do. It was a double-blind situation where the purchaser did not know where the practice was, just described the type of practice. I
Mm.
had no clue as to who the purchaser was. And I had to keep everything secret from the staff, from my patients, from everybody. So
Mm.
with my son being away in the evenings, I devoted that time to getting all of the paperwork that they required, everything straight. And it took about a year to get my practice ready to sell. But I successfully sold my dental practice, which was not done back then,
Mhm.
not back in the 90s. And I knew that the director of dentistry for the Department of Corrections was someone I knew from MCV, and I had approached him a year before I sold my practice, and he said, "I will find a spot for you whenever you're ready."
Mm.
So what that did was to give me some security as far as benefits and insurance and paid leave time and holidays, the things that I needed as a parent to be able to provide more time to advocate for my son. So it was an experience that I had no clue that I would enjoy as much as I did, because it was sort of a ministry in a
Yeah.
sense, because I'm a natural nurturer. That's what I do. And I was able to provide a service to offenders who were not accustomed to the quality of care, the level of care that I provided. And I was not compromising. And, I had to do what I was taught to do.
Mhm.
And it was very rewarding for me, especially when I was able to teach them how to take care of their whole oral health and
Mhm.
the impact it had on the rest of their bodies. And it was very rewarding for me, not so much financially, but I knew that I didn't have to worry about running to the mailbox to see if the mailman brought an insurance check. I knew that I
Right.
was going to get paid. And so that was a wonderful cushion. It wasn't that it was so much, but it was secure.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that experience. Even after I retired, I went back and just did exams for over a year.
Oh, wow.
And don't regret it. Not once have I regretted that decision. It's not for everybody, but it was wonderful for me.
But again, you offer so much in what you're sharing. What I'm hearing and teasing out of this is this story. Today we in the news, there's a lot of media attention to the treatment of incarcerated folks, and we talk about human rights and humanity, and some notorious prisons are more closed, and we talk about should there be for-profit prisons and all these kinds of things. But I think particularly when you would have entered into corrections, the compassion that you infused into those individuals who were incarcerated, and being able to treat them with care and dignity, and actually recognizing them as humanity, just in not necessarily the best of circumstances. I think we struggle with that still today, and when we talk about treating what people are calling vulnerable populations, right?
Mhm.
And so you really set a bar for us even in that work, I think.
Well, they're people, that they're human beings. And it was not my job to act as judge. They had already been judged and they had been sentenced. And so I asked them to treat me the way that I treat you. And most of them did, which meant that it was a mutually respective relationship. When they came in for dental treatment, they were appreciative. I mean, they really were, because they would tell me that, we're just not used to this. And so I felt good. A lot of them were in a situation where they had structure for the first time in their lives. They had somebody to treat them with respect for the first time in their lives. And I'm just glad that I had an opportunity to have a positive impact on some of them.
No, that's beautiful. And I would be remiss if I didn't pluck out another little jewel you put in there. When you were talking about the advocacy that you had to do for your son. And it makes me think about, these dual roles that, professionals probably of all hues and ethnicities and backgrounds, but I think particularly for professionals of color and African American, there's all these different tensions that exist. And I play this role in my office, I play this role in the greater community, I play this role to my family, I play this role to my church, I play this, fill in the blank, sorority group, whatever. And your ability to navigate that and maybe press pause on some career aspirations to be more fully present in the advocacy of your son is just so laudable and admirable and such a joy to hear about and even take. I've got 3 small kids that are 6, 4, and my baby will be 11 months tomorrow. I have 3 girls. And I think about things like that, or I think about even, I have an older sister who, you said another jewel about the marriage didn't last, but motherhood did. I don't understand, the journey of single parenting is you got a special seat in heaven, because I've got a wife and we do it together. And I can't imagine how exhausting, being a single parent is. But, I'm saying all that to say it's such a joy to hear you reference how that advocacy and then again, picking up from other things we've talked about, that fight has to continue, because it's not lost to me that you're now advocating for a young Black boy, right? That we'd be remiss if we didn't specify that. And so then now the fight is not only professional, but now the fight is for my family and my legacy and my my literal blood that comes after me, to give them access and overcome hurdles that are thrown in the way, especially if we talked a little bit about role modeling and mentoring, and kids have an understanding earlier ages that dentistry is an option. But so often, particularly our young people of color, are tracked right into certain thresholds or categories and not given the additional resources or aids and all of that thing. So for you to have to be advocating and navigating that at that time, it's just a jewel that I wanted to make sure and honor and pluck out of what you mentioned. You've got a couple of zingers in there that I could probably tease out, but that was a great one. Yeah. So just thank you so much for sharing so much of that with us, and that personal aspect with us. We're pretty much at time, and we've kind of pointed on this already, but I'd like to ask you more directly. What do you feel like you'd like your legacy to be?
Wow. Well, in the absence of a huge lottery windfall, I don't have, I guess, as much tangible gifts to leave as perhaps a legacy of determination and compassion, generosity, inspiring others. If I do that, it's what makes me feel good. And these things are, I guess, somewhat selfish, because whatever it is that I do because it makes me feel good. And so I can't claim to be, so angelic or anything like that, or saintly, but because when I do something to help others, it makes me feel good. And so it's sort of a selfish investment, but that's probably what I would like people to remember me for. And if I should hit that lottery, if first I have to remember to buy a ticket, but if I should hit it and I can leave some money to folks, then I would do that. But that's going to be secondary to what I think is really important. And by far the greatest accomplishment that I have ever made or done was that of rearing a now 40-year-old man. He's a wonderful person who is able to live independent of me. Of course, you wouldn't think so, because he texts me 100 times a day. But I'm comfortable that, he can pay his bills, he can arrange his medical care, he can, do things that many people are not as blessed as I.
Yeah.
And so that is my greatest accomplishment. And I just haven't had time to talk about the blessing of the camaraderie and the friends in the Old Dominion Dental Society and the Peter B. Ramsey Dental Society, who embraced me, supported me, encouraged me, and are still in my life. And I love them dearly. So one day maybe I can talk about how great they are.
No, I think that's so crucial, particularly for African Americans, when we're still in a profession that is more diverse, but is not truly inclusive of us, right? I think the groups that have always been for us, like Peter B. Ramsey, like Old Dominion, like the National Dental Association, other identity groups, have groups, National Hispanic Dental Association, are invaluable resources and allow us to continue to thrive. So your story is certainly one of determination, compassion, and generosity. And we're just the better for knowing you. I feel so privileged to be able to know you. There's so many folks that paved the way for me to be able to be the only Black full-time male faculty member to walk these halls. It's a privilege to be able to interact and know you and talk with you, Dr. Freeman. This has been such a joy. Any last words at all before we sign off tonight?
No, just thank you again. This is 45 years after MCV, and I just feel truly special that you sought me out to interview and to chat with, and I'm honored, and just hope that I can continue to give if I'm needed anywhere. Would love to be able to meet with you again, and I'm delighted to know you. I'm excited because there was no you in 73. There was no faculty member, nor was there female who looked like me. So I thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure and a joy. It really, the way that you have paved the way, and in many ways, you've got the last laugh. Not only have you survived, you've thrived in this dental space and in the world and in life, and are continuing to do so. And we just thank you so much for being with us tonight on Diversity Dialogues, where we talk about different things to honor our past, celebrate our present, and ensure that we have an equitable and inclusive future. And thank you all for being with us tonight. This is recorded, so it'll be available on YouTube for viewing, or folks that you haven't, folks that you know weren't able to join us live tonight. And thank you so much for the conversation honoring Dr. Freeman, Erma Freeman, with the first African-American female graduate of the MCV and now VCU School of Dentistry. We so appreciate you and thank you for blazing that trail. Good night, everyone.
Good night.